then you know where I am. In the country where I'm traveling, Tibet.
Tibet and its people have often been misrepresented with cliches. For the West, it was a utopia, a fantasy based on the depiction of Shangri-La, a perfect place where people live for centuries in a state of happiness and contentment, as described in the British author James Hilton's 1933 novel, Lost Horizon.
If you can imagine a hidden place, tucked safely away from the world, concealed by walls of high snow-capped mountains, a place rich with all the strange beauty of your nighttime dreams.
For the Communist Party of China, Tibetans were depicted as serfs or barbarians in need of rescue and rehabilitation, exemplified by propaganda films like the 1963 film Nongnu Serfs, directed by Li Jun, where all the characters were played by Han Chinese. The main character, Jampa, is employed as a human horse for his young master, but is rescued from this fate by the Chinese People's Liberation Army. But in reality,
everything was planned by Mao Zedong as early as 1949. Following the then recent victory of the Communist Revolution, Mao revived China's old imperial ambitions to impose its sovereignty on Tibet. He was not concerned by historical realities, or that the country had been governed for centuries by the Dalai Lamas. The first phase of the Maoist initiative was simple: to force the Tibetan authorities to admit that the Chinese forces marching upon their country were not an army of conquerors, but an army of liberation from Western imperialism.
But the wolf in sheep's clothing revealed its true intentions. From 1955 to 1956, Chinese forces imposed socialist reforms in the provinces of Amdo and Kham, leading to widespread resentment and uprisings. Monks, nuns, peasants, nomads, soldiers, and traders joined forces, with their monasteries becoming focal points of the resistance. Despite being outnumbered, the resistance successfully slowed down the People's Liberation Army. In 1957, Gompo Tashi and Druktsang organized a resistance movement, Chushigangdruk, also known as 4 Rivers and 6 Ranges, based on the geographical description of eastern Tibet. With CIA support, they launched guerrilla attacks in 1958, gaining control of southern Tibet as a second wave of resistance. Eventually, the sheer number of the Chinese Liberation Army allowed them to take control of most parts of Tibet, resulting in many Tibetan casualties, and they headed to Lhasa. In March 1959, fearing abduction, the Dalai Lama fled Lhasa with Chushigangdruk's help, eventually reaching India.
Refugees on the move, fleeing from their homeland. Another unhappy chapter of a typical story of our troubled age. These came from Tibet, escaping the tyranny of the Red Chinese regime from which the Dalai Lama had already fled. It is estimated that 12,000 of his people have trekked over the border into northern India.
Following the Tibetan uprising in 1959 and subsequent exile of the 14th Dalai Lama, the Central Tibetan Administration, CTA, was established. With the support of the Indian government, the Dalai Lama and his followers found refuge in India, particularly in the North Indian hill station of Mussoorie initially, and later moved to Dharamsala in 1960. The CTA aimed to provide a democratic government structure for Tibetans living in exile and those who fled Tibet to preserve Tibetan culture and identity. Over the years, Tibetan schools, refugee centers, hospitals, and other infrastructure were established in the settlements to support the Tibetan refugee community. In 1999, I was enrolled in Upper TCV School. The school receives full funding from His Holiness, the 14th Dalai Lama, and the CTA through sponsorship from the West. Those days are a mix of ordinary childhood experiences and struggles. I often played soccer on the dirt ground with school Bata shoes, sometimes barefoot because I couldn't afford cleats that would quickly wear out. I remember the embarrassment of wearing worn-out Bata shoe in class, despite the unpleasant odor from all the sweat. Reflecting on the past, I now realize that I once perceived the world as vast, despite the fact that the Tibetan community in exile comprises only about 150,000 individuals, with some residing in the USA and Europe, and the majority in India. This represents a mere 2% of the Tibetan population, with the majority still residing in Tibet. For simplicity, moving forward, I will refer to Tibetans in exile as Tibetan in exile, and Tibetans in Tibet as simply Tibetan. Fast forward to the present, and the recently released Freedom House's Freedom in the World 2023 report dated March 9th, 2023 reveals a disheartening global freedom score of 1 out of a possible 100 for Tibet. This marks the 7th consecutive year that Tibet has languished at the bottom of the rankings, following the dismal standings of 2022 and 2021. What was once the hot topics about Buddhist nations invaded by the Red Chinese would dissolve into the Chinese Communist Party's Cultural Revolution with fascination and amusement akin to a magic trick performed at the circus. Behind such a facade lies the truth. China had already initiated a strategy far beyond mere violence and brutality. Its plan was to indoctrinate Tibetans into Chinese culture through cultural genocide enforced by various political policies from Mao Zedong to Xi Jinping.
Moderne Internate seien gebaut worden, doch sie liegen viele Kilometer von den Dörfern entfernt. Nach Schätzungen mussten fast 1 Million Kinder ihre Eltern verlassen, um die Schulen zu besuchen. Uns Journalisten erlaubt die Staatsführung nicht, nach Tibet zu reisen.
Despite the efforts of the Tibetan government in exile, led by His Holiness, the 14th Dalai Lama, peace negotiations continually fell short. With each successive Chinese leader, the plight of Tibet only worsened, despite claims of progress. The year 2008 emerged as a watershed moment in this ongoing struggle, marking a tipping point for the Tibetan people.
The footprints in their history stretch back 5,000 years. But for the world's greatest wall builders, makers of a forbidden city, what happens tonight is not merely a small step, but a great leap. China is welcoming the world.
Through the extravagant opening ceremony, the Chinese government showcased China's historical glory and new achievements, which would once again evoke nostalgia for the West, reminiscent of the Cultural Revolution. Meanwhile, behind the vibrant facade, Tibetan people took to the streets to express their sentiments.
Tibetans rally in Rebkong, eastern Tibet, making their voices heard after 6 people, including teenagers and a young single mother, set themselves on fire this week, calling for more rights and the return of the Dalai Lama.
The Australian Broadcasting Corporation aired amateur tourist video Wednesday, purporting to show Chinese armored vehicles driving through Lhasa streets last week. Journalists and activist groups report Chinese troops and police have tightened security as protests spread to Chinese provinces neighboring Tibet.
Since the waves of protests and riots against the Chinese government in 2008, Beijing has tightened its grip on Tibetan areas, imposing suffocating security measures. This heavy-handed approach extends to Tibetan religious and cultural life, with the Chinese language now mandated as the primary medium of instruction in most Tibetan schools. The consequences for Tibetan dissent have been severe, with hundreds of thousands arrested. Despite this, Tibetan people have resorted to peaceful protests, only to be imprisoned for merely possessing images of His Holiness, the 14th Dalai Lama. Peaceful public gatherings, once a means of expression and religious communion, are now stifled under the guise of conspiracy. By May 2022, 160 people had self-immolated in Tibet, with 10 occurrences in exile since 2009. Amidst this oppressive backdrop, Tibetan artists have found ways to channel their frustrations into poignant expressions. Poems, songs, and stories serve as allegorical and metaphorical critiques of the regime. However, the cost of such creative defiance is high, with many artists finding themselves behind bars for extended periods, branded as separatists. The harsh reality faced by Tibetans becomes an almost impossible narrative to convey through any medium. One of many brave Tibetans, a Tibetan language activist, Tashi Wangchuk would find himself in prison with constant surveillance under CCP.
我们在那边不敢讨论这些问题的，因为现在很多手机和那些都可以监控，而且我们不知道在哪些地方放了一些监控或者监听器，它可以用任何名义来随便逮捕你，而且没有办法去上诉，或者说是因为没有一个完整的法律体系，所以我们没有办法去讨论这些问题。
Through this challenging environment, a writer and filmmaker from the village of Trika Lahakang in the Amdo region of Tibet has successfully delved into the authentic and intricate facets of the Tibetan experience under the Chinese regime.
村庄其实很小，可能那时候可能有几十户人家，现在有100户人家吧。小时候觉得特别大，但是现在人多了，然后反而觉得那个地方很小，但是确实是一个很美丽的地方。就在黄河边上，然后有田地也有草原，所以我们那边是半农半牧，村里的人可以去山上放牧，同时也可以在那个村里面种田。所以在文化上可能我接触到的，比如说农耕的文化或者这种那叫什么呀？草原的文化都有一些吧。
Pema Tseden was raised by his grandfather, and his family were nomadic herders. His grandfather, a religious man, believed that Pema Tseden was the reincarnation of his own grandfather.
Jaya, tu jena miazo ni tarong yok.
Tarong yok ya.
Tu terus jisi kita tu ai jinche magna shinu sisonja. Jinya ge je kamiya da ana manazri.
He would tell Pema Tseden that in his past life, he possessed significant religious knowledge, as the concept of reincarnation is deeply rooted in the culture. At an early age, Pema Tseden would often sit next to his grandfather, copying numerous Buddhist scriptures, while most children his age were herding animals. Occasionally, he would go into the mountains to herd sheep, goats, and yaks. He recalls his home as a beautiful and joyous place, full of dear memories when he left for Beijing.
所以你会觉得它一直会觉得它很美。然后藏族的好多言语中也有这样的比喻，比如说，再美的地方也不会美过自己的家乡。可能你出生的那个地方，可能是一个别人看了可能是一个很破烂的一个地方，可能没有任何的吸引力，但是 对一个人来说，自己出生的那个地方，长大的那个地方，可能就是最美的一个地方。
Many of his childhood experiences are reflected in his books and films. One of the most memorable aspects of his childhood was movie screenings. One summer, a movie projection team came to the village and screened a romantic comedy, The Young People of Our Village, in the temple hall. Even though he didn't understand the concept of love at the time, the scenes left him with many beautiful fantasies. Soon after, Pema Tseden remained in this village near the Yellow River due to his circumstances. A construction team was sent by the higher-ups to their location, and some members of the team were intellectuals who showed novel movies in the workers' hall at night, such as Modern Times, Indian Cinema Wanderers, and The Mark of Zorro. These films opened up horizons for Pema Tseden, who sneaked into the auditorium to watch them. By the time he reached junior high, he had already watched over 200 movies, becoming a young cinephile.
발손제는 총은 안도사차 초록하니 너창노라 마른 그 파이 내가 총총소리 원래 전에 그 논의는 시가 좋아 친구 그 논의는 정말
Though he never considered becoming a director because that seemed impossible for a village kid at the time. After graduating from junior high, he was admitted to a state normal college. At 18, he completed his studies, returned to his hometown, and became an elementary school teacher. In 1987, Pema Tseden earned a decent living. By day, he taught classes, and by night, he immersed himself in books like The Biography of Milarepa, Chinese and Russian Literature, among others. Despite leading a fulfilling life, Pema's thirst for knowledge and expression persisted, leading him to begin writing during this time. After a few years, he pursued higher education and enrolled in Northwest Nationalities University for Tibetan Language and Literature in Lanzhou in 1991. There he published his first novel, Man and Dog, in the provincial literary magazine, marking the beginning of his prolific writing career. Which included over 40 short stories and translations of more than 10 Tibetan Chinese novels. Later on, his stories and novels often served as sources for his film scripts, helping to solidify his reputation as an auteur. Graduating from college marked the beginning of another cycle for him. This time, he worked as a civil servant in a governmental unit in his hometown for 5 years. Day after day, as he sat at his desk signing contracts and stamping documents, he found himself yearning to escape once more. He believed that he could achieve more, uncertain of what the future held. Yet his passion for writing never waned. He returned to Northwest Minzu University to complete an MA in Translation Studies between 2000 and 2002. While pursuing his MA in Tibetan literature at Northwest Minzu University in the early 2000s, Pema Tseden crossed paths with his friend Gang Chuk, who was studying in the same field. Upon completing his degree, Gang Chuk secured a position at the non-profit Trace Foundation's office in Xining. Pema Tseden was awarded a 2-year grant to study directing and scriptwriting at the prestigious Beijing Film Academy. This scholarship marked a pivotal moment in his career as he first ventured into the world of filmmaking. Thus began his journey as the first Tibetan director nurtured by the Academy. This accomplishment is even more noteworthy considering the challenging terrain of the highly censored Chinese film industry. Despite these obstacles, the filmmaker has not only navigated through the complexities, but has also actively embraced artistic experimentation in the process. The outcome of this creative journey is an impressive portfolio of 7 critically acclaimed films, with an additional 2 currently under post-production. His accomplishment underscores the artist's remarkable ability to encapsulate the essence of Tibetan life, offering a unique perspective that not only stands out, but also defies stereotypical portrayals found in Hollywood and Chinese cinema. The filmmaker has become a pioneering director, paving the way for the new Tibetan wave cinema. The emergence of Tibetan films marks a significant moment, portraying narratives that delve into the lives of ordinary Tibetan people as they navigate a renewed wave of economic, social, and political challenges. These cinematic endeavors notably steer clear of perpetuating stereotypes traditionally associated with Tibet and its people, offering a fresh and nuanced perspective on the complexities of contemporary Tibetan society.
New Tibetan wave cinema has emerged in recent years as a movement within the global film industry, where visionary directors present a refreshing and dynamic perspective on Tibetan society and culture, while concurrently offering profound commentary on universal themes. These films exemplify a remarkable sense of realism, employing minimalist aesthetics, non-professional actors, and an unwavering focus on the intricacies of everyday life. Consequently, viewers are presented with an intimate and poetic cinematic experience that resonates deeply. The origins of new Tibetan wave cinema can be traced back to earlier films such as The Cup by Khyentse Norbu. This cinematic masterpiece portrays a poignant true story of 2 young Tibetan refugees grappling with their monastic duties and the fascination with watching the 1998 World Cup final within a monastery in exile in India. In doing so, it evokes the essence of traditional films from that era. During my upbringing, I encountered only a handful of Tibetan films such as Drimin Lhasa and Phon Anutanu. These films, with their themes of exile and identity, resonated with me simply because they were Tibetan films on the big screen. Growing up, I mainly watched anime dubbed in Hindi and Bollywood films. Surprisingly, in India, there was a Tibetan channel where I watched Chinese TV shows like Journey to the West, dubbed in Tibetan. Among them, Khair, a short film based on a story by Buchungdi Sonam, stood out. It explores the friendship between a Tibetan and a Kashmiri boy bonded by poetry. Its narrative offers a unique perspective on Tibetan identity in exile. Despite its short format, Khair inspired me with its ambitious themes. Reflecting on my past assumptions, I once believed that all Tibetan-themed films were crafted by Tibetan directors. However, reality proved far from the truth. It's worth noting that as of today, I've identified fewer than 40 Tibetan feature films directed by Tibetan filmmakers. I've yet to watch half of them, as gaining access to these films can be quite challenging. Let's entertain the notion of adding another 40 films to this list in case I miss some, although it's important to stress that this figure is not an exact representation of the total available. From my guess that fewer than 100 Tibetan films have been produced from 1959 to 2024. In stark contrast, a staggering 9,199 feature films were produced globally in 2019 alone, as reported by Omdia's film production database. While India dominated with an impressive 2,412 films in the same year. Putting this into perspective, matching India's annual output would take roughly 1,574 years for Tibetans. The landscape for Tibetan filmmakers is significantly more complex than mere numbers convey. One of the most difficult aspects of any filmmaking endeavor is securing funding, and this is no different in Tibetan filmmaking.
The trouble you go through to find funding to make a feature film with no reward at all financially. You can't even pay back your, the people who invested money in your film. It really feels bad,
Many filmmakers in exile gravitate towards the art of documentary filmmaking due to its financial viability and career longevity, whereas filmmakers in Tibet often focus on fictional films due to the political sensitivity under the CCP. With only a few directors in exile and professionals working both on and off screen.
Rito and I actually started filmmaking in the 80s when we were students in Berkeley in California. And at the time, there was actually no Tibetan filmmakers in exile. I mean, no one at all.
Along with the limited number of projects, it becomes financially difficult for Tibetans to find work as actors, given that there are barely any working actors. After completing a film, it's even harder to find a distributor for Tibetan filmmakers.
Or just getting it out into the world, and the fact that actually there is no support for Tibetan cinema and there is no distribution and there's no market. So we had this idea that we could get it out in front of a lot of people, and that's one of the reasons we wanted to make a feature film.
The majority of Tibetan films are self-funded, as there is little to no support from institutional organizations.
But I really feel like we need to support them more. I feel like the institutions need to support them more. I just think, there should be funds to support filmmaking and filmmakers and artists. And at every point when I have the chance to speak to anybody, I encourage them to do that. Because I feel like that's what's missing. Like all over the world, people have a lot of governmental or institutional support for their films. And
the perseverance of Tibetan filmmakers, both within and outside Tibet, in portraying Tibetan narratives through cinema has sparked the rise of the new Tibetan wave. However, it was Pema Tseiden who stood as a true pioneer, paving the way for this cinematic movement.
2002年开始，我到北京电影学院学习电影，就是专业的学习电影，然后就是学习了大概用了5年时间学习电影，然后这个中间也看了很多导演的电影啊，一个偶然的机会接触到了一些伊朗电影，然后。
To understand Pema Tseiden's filmography, let's delve into Iranian cinema. Despite the stark contrast in culture and language between Tibet and Iran, there was some shared similarity to political, economic, and historical context. Moreover, both regions are rich in poetry and painterly images. Several prominent directors paved the way for the Iranian New Wave cinema movement, challenging Western stereotypes. Renowned directors such as Abbas Kiarostami, Jafar Panahi, Majid Majidi, and many others have contributed to this cinematic movement. The Iranian New Wave cinema explores the development of Iranian cinema, closely intertwined with the nation's turbulent political history. From the rule of Reza Shah Pahlavi to the rise of Khomeini and the establishment of the Islamic Republic during the 1970s Iranian Revolution, the film reflects societal shifts and anticipates social change. It highlights the dual role of mainstream cinema as a propaganda tool for both the monarchy and the religious regime, while also chronicling the efforts of filmmakers to depict harsh social realities and challenge censorship. Under the stringent rule of the Chinese Communist regime in Tibet, filmmakers found themselves constrained to explore only specific subjects and themes pre-approved by the government. Pema Tseden's 5-year tenure at the Beijing Film Academy played a crucial role in navigating the intricate politics of filmmaking.
电影它需要一个很多的可能外力的因素，或者一个综合因素的这样一个作用，所以你除了创作之外，你还要做很多的跟创作无关的一些东西，比如说可能人际关系的一个处理，比如说可能要面对各种审查或者各种资金的问题的这样一些解决或者挑战，所以你会有很多就是创作之外的东西会影响。
With all the challenges, Pema Tseden, an acclaimed writer in Tibet, has decided to create his graduation short film at the Beijing Film Academy. Pema Tseden's graduation short film, The Grassland, 2004, revolves around a Tibetan herding community scandalized by the theft of a yak. The yak had been set free as an act of religious merit. This theft is particularly outrageous because it is not the first time that such sacred animals have been stolen. The theft of the yak is presented as an act of sacrilege, an appalling sign of the rift between the young and the old, a falling away from traditional cultural values, social hierarchies, and religious practices. The Grassland serves as a source for Pema Tseden's later work in several ways. First, theft as the epitome of the erosion of Tibetan traditions will develop into a recurring motif in Pema Tseden's later films. The grassland setting in Pema Tseden's film is profoundly Tibetan in its thematic elements, making it potentially challenging for those unfamiliar with the culture to fully appreciate its nuances. The first aspect is Tsetar, a well-known tradition in the religious context of setting an animal free. Even though people depend on animals, once you Tsetar an animal, it would accumulate bad karma to steal or kill it. This tradition underscores the deep respect for life and the spiritual connection between the people, the animals, and the environment. Another important aspect depicted in the film is the religious oath. Tibetan Buddhism places considerable emphasis on such oaths, which play a crucial role in guiding moral and ethical decisions within the community. These oaths are not mere formalities, but are integral to the spiritual and social fabric of Tibetan life, influencing how individuals face the certain judgment. In my view, the short film excels in conveying what Pema Tseden aims to express. The narrative is an authentic and raw portrayal of Tibetan life. The film captures the essence of Tibetan culture through small, seemingly insignificant gestures and subtle mannerisms, which are unmistakably Tibetan. The customs shown in the film are depicted with remarkable accuracy, offering a rare and genuine glimpse into the life and traditions of the Tibetan people. This level of authenticity is largely due to the contributions of art director Santar Gail. His commitment to detail ensured that the film's representation of customs, attire, and settings is both accurate and respectful. However, the film is not without its imperfections. There are clear discontinuities in the settings of characters, and many of the static shots and pans are somewhat unsteady. These technical flaws can be distracting but are understandable, given that this is the work of a first-time director and cinematographer. Luo Fan's involvement in the film began in an interesting way. He was approached by Pema Tseden while at the canteen of the Beijing Film Academy, marking the beginning of their working relationship. The meeting led to Luo Fan serving as the director of photography for this short film, and later for The Sacred Arrow, further solidifying their professional partnership. The film was shot on 35mm color film,
a choice that adds a certain richness and texture to the visuals. The use of slow pan movements and static shots is a deliberate stylistic choice meant to reflect the slow and contemplative pace of life among Tibetan nomadic herders. This technique not only captures the rhythm of daily life, but also invites viewers to slow down and immerse themselves in the story. In an interview, Pema Tserin reflected on the significance of Grassland as his debut film. He stated, "The short film Grassland is my film debut. The shooting experience of this film is precious to me, allowing me to understand the entire process of film production. This experience played a crucial role in completing my feature film debut, The Silent Holy Stone." This statement underscores the importance of Grassland, not only as a standalone work, but also as a foundational experience that shaped his future projects. The Grassland follows the chieftain Sedruk as he takes the old woman Amatsomo across the grassland to confront the young men suspected of stealing the yak she had set free. Amatsomo, however, is reluctant about the journey. As she is concerned about bringing punishment to the thief, which would contradict her compassionate intention of setting free a living creature, even though the chieftain insisted on punishing the culprit based on his modern administrative sense of justice. The culprit turns out to be Huga, the son of the chieftain Dorlo. When the sequence ends with a return to an empty frame of the sky, expectations are raised about the two characters, and possibilities for development remain open. Pema Tserin's debut feature, The Silent Holy Stones, stands as a monumental achievement in Tibetan cinema, boasting an all non-professional Tibetan cast and crew and presented entirely in the Tibetan language. This landmark film offers a fresh perspective on Tibetan culture, breaking away from prevailing mystic and exotic stereotypes. With the raw immediacy akin to a documentary, the narrative unfolds deliberately, revealing new possibilities and perspectives with each journey depicted on screen. During his time in the Beijing Film Academy, Pema Tserin made a short film called Holy Stone in 2004. Later, he would expand the short into a feature film with his colleagues from the Academy. With very limited resources, the shooting began. The film was shot with 35mm color film, with director of photography Ann Lee and assistant camera and art director Sotar Gyal. With the emergence of digital filmmaking, Pema Tserin's later films were all shot digitally. Tserin's masterful storytelling captures the essence of Tibetan experiences, anchoring them in reality while filling them with humanity. Even amidst the most ordinary of settings, his narrative draws us in with long, unbroken shots, devoid of plot twists or thematic endings, instead opting for ambiguity. I believe The Silent Holy Stones is semi-autobiographical for Pema Tserin. His childhood, growing up with his grandfather in a small village, served as inspiration for his first 3 films. The places in this film are not just settings to pass by. They are deeply connected to the inhabitants who call the land home. Each winding path, weather-beaten structure, and sprawling scenery holds profound cultural significance. It's a small, crowded home, yet a loving one. The film was shot near the Gawa Monastery in the Amdo region, where Pema Tserin grew up. It begins with a shot of carving a mani stone, which is a homage to the 2001 film The Cup by Kensei Norbu. The film follows a 10-year-old Buddhist monk known as Little Lama. The little Lama does daily prayers and chores that was told his teachers in the monastery, has a 7-year-old Tulku, whom was well-respected Lama, but for the little Lama, he was companion and a friend. The two boys train and play together, but their real fun is watching TV, the only few channels available to them. His father came to take him home for a few days for the New Year celebration. After a long journey on the horseback over icy steppes, on each journey they stopped by the Zoba stone carver place, the old man who carves the holy stones, the Mani stones. On the way out, we find out that Zoba's son has moved to Lhasa and has not returned for the new year. With the increase in urbanization, the younger generation finds themselves drawn to the city for employment and opportunities, leaving tradition as a constant theme in his next films. When little Lama's father bought a new VHS set, he finds himself glued to his family's new TV, watching the popular Chinese television series Journey to the West. Meanwhile, the villagers are rehearsing their annual staging of a traditional Tibetan opera, Tume Kundun, for the new year, which evolved into his next film. On the way back, it turns out that Zoba has died, which emphasizes the eclipse of traditional practice as Zoba was left without a successor. Mani stone molds were developed due to the vast and sparsely populated Tibet plateau, where not everyone can access monasteries. Pema Tseden's film refrains from implying that the rapid economic development brought about by the Chinese Communist Party was solely responsible for the erosion of Tibetan culture and tradition. Instead, it skillfully leaves viewers with the freedom to form their own subjective interpretations. This narrative approach enables Tseden to continue creating films amidst stringent censorship. For me, a scene in Silent Holy Stone captures the aspect of the meaning behind the film. A drunk guy at the dance party had a confrontation with Little Lama's brother, who played in Tume Kundun. Tume Kundun is a renowned mythical tale originating from a Yataka story of Prince Visvantara embodying the virtue of selfless giving. Prince Visvantara gave away his kingdom's first protective jewel, leading to his banishment along with his family. Throughout his journey, he selflessly gave away his wife, children, and even his own eyes. Ultimately, the beggars, who were actually gods, revealed themselves and restored his family and eyesight, testing his selflessness. The guy who played the Tume Kundun acted out of rage and jealousy when the drunk guy tried to flirt with his girlfriend. It's nearly impossible for him to embody such virtues of selflessness in today's world, despite the prevalence of such mythical narratives in Tibetan culture. Lobsang, who portrayed the young Lama in the film, he later chose to depart from monastic life and embrace marriage in search of new life in this modern world. The film follows the story of a director as he travels with his cinematographer and the producer in the search of actors for a film adaptation of Tibetan legend Tume Kundun. During their journey, they visit various villages and performing arts centers, encountering a variety of characters and situations. On the surface, it seems like the story is about if the director could find the actors that were right for the movie. Could the actress reunite with his ex-boyfriend? What would happen as the producer tells his own past love story? It's much more layered than it seems. The film also demythologized the Tibetan legend of Tume Kundun. In one village, the crew meets up a man who embodies the spirit of Tume Kundun.
This man had given his wife to a blind man from the village whose own wife had died out of compassion. Despite the deep love and 10 years of being together and never had a fight with his wife, he made this selfless sacrifice. This encounter prompts questions about the morality and rights involved in giving away another person. Later in the film, the crew meets a singer in a nightclub who used to perform Chume Kundun. He shares his reasons for no longer performing the role, providing a different perspective on the legend and its relevance to contemporary life. Even in the end, the director doesn't think any actor can play the role of Chume Kundun, both metaphorically and literally. I think the locations plays important role in the film as the crew drive in a jeep through the landscapes of wide open spaces punctuated by small towns and villages. It appears like film takes in 90s as economic development and political enforcement imposed in the part of Amdo region by the Chinese Communist Party. Most of the people in the film wears modernized clothes, big Chinese letters in front of the schools, shops, and most buildings. One thing I've noticed throughout the film is when the crew drives across various roads, where the grasslands are marked with barbed wires or poles. They encounter various herders with animals either crossing the road or passing by. There is a scene where it's so subtle. How the animals panic at the beginning, but after a while it's the people who get startled by the car horns.
The second thing is the crew driving to different performing arts centers, including the monastery, to find actors for Chume Kundun. The first theater center seems state-funded with modern infrastructure, with a few Tibetan school students performing Chinese opera, and none of them played in Chume Kundun. This indicates a potential assimilation of traditional Tibetan culture into mainstream Chinese performing arts. In contrast, the second theater, with its half-finished structure, teaches Tibetan kids traditional Tibetan performing arts. The director praised one individual. The minimalist film technique of mostly wide-angle long shots and a few close-up shots in the car makes the audience feel like part of the crew.
This film marks the second collaboration with Sontar Gyal as the cinematographer. Every shot in the film is deliberately composed in terms of camera placement, with most being long shots. I think this film looks distinct from Tibetan's later works, possibly due to budget constraints or a deliberate creative choice. It would prove that Sontar Gyal would be more suited to being a director after working with Pema Tseiden for a few years. The music in the films consists of songs played in cars, used as transitional or background sounds that linger as the characters converse. This choice of music creates a unique atmosphere that is true to the characters and period, adding realism to the film. It marked the second collaboration with sound designer Dukert Sering, who would go on to work frequently with Tseiden in future projects and later become a director himself. Sering's contributions helped shape the auditory landscape of these films, enhancing the storytelling through carefully selected soundscapes. This portrayal suggests a tension between the preservation of Tibetan cultural heritage and the influence of external cultural forces. Overall, these observations underscore the complexities of cultural identity, adaptation, and resilience in the face of modernization and external pressures, themes that are carried into the next film. Pema Tseiden's third film unfolds in the liminal space between a bustling town and its outskirts, set a few years prior to his previous work, The Search. Unlike the Tibet, which often depicted in cinema, Tseiden's Tibet in Old Dog, here the landscape is far from majestic. It's characterized by half-finished construction projects, muddy and rutted roads traversed by motorcycles and cars, and animals roaming the streets. The atmosphere is thick with the sounds of everyday life, from the clatter of pool tables set up outdoors to the distant echoes of lumberjacks and passing vehicles. Through this unfiltered lens, Tseiden captures Tibet not just as a setting, but as a subject. He addresses the underlying conflict of location as a subtext, with characters grappling with the realities of modernity while holding on to tradition. The places are left in shambles due to socio-economic and political changes brought by the Chinese Communist Party, whose presence echoes in big Chinese characters in front of most buildings. Meanwhile, its people still believe in living off their ancestral lands. The film follows a linear story structure and takes place in the early 2000s in Tibet. Gonpo sells his father's prized Tibetan Mastiff without permission, sparking a family conflict. Police officer Dorje helps resolve the situation, emphasizing familial harmony. Amid discussions about parenthood, Gonpo's father seeks advice for his childless son and daughter-in-law. Despite Gonpo's reluctance, they visit a hospital where they learn there are no fertility issues, which would evolve into a main theme in his later film. When thieves attempt to steal the Mastiff, Gonpo's impulsive actions land him in jail,
In a tender moment, his father offers support. Despite offers to buy the mastiff, the old man chooses to end its life. The ending of Old Dog sparked controversy, particularly because the version shown in China omitted a pivotal and graphic scene involving the killing of the dog. This censorship led to widespread discussions in international film circuits. Critics and viewers saw the original ending as a profound commentary on the cultural crisis within Tibet, highlighting how Tibetan mastiffs have been commodified by wealthy individuals who are benefiting from the Chinese Communist Party's economic development initiatives. This situation reflects broader themes of cultural exploitation and the impact of rapid economic changes on traditional ways of life. The film employs similar techniques to those used in The Search, but with some notable changes. While handheld shots are still present, the majority of the shots are static, giving the film a documentary-like feel. This approach was achieved through collaboration with cinematographer Sontar Giel, whose work enhances the film's authentic and immersive quality. One of the most significant changes in this film is the sound design, crafted by Dukert Sering. The sound design is not just a background element, but a crucial part of the storytelling. It adds layers of subtext to the settings, helping to convey the mood and atmosphere of the scenes more profoundly. The sounds of the natural environment, automobiles, construction, and subtle audio cues contribute to the film's realism. Despite the film's critical acclaim, Pema Tsedan would still face challenges in securing funding for his next project. The success of Old Dog did, however, help him gain recognition and support internationally. Icarus Films, a prominent distributor of documentary films in North America, decided to license one of Tsedan's later films. This partnership was significant because it provided Tsedan with a platform to reach a broader audience outside of China, increasing his visibility and the impact of his work. In an interview, Pema Tsedan revealed that his first two films, The Silent Holy Stones and The Search, did not manage to recover their production costs. This financial struggle underscores the difficulties faced by independent filmmakers in niche markets, particularly those making culturally specific films that might not have mainstream appeal. For Old Dog, Tsedan had a modest budget of $70,000. This information was shared by Yang Yin, a director and friend of Pema Tsedan, during the Pema Tsedan Creation Review seminar held on June 21st, 2023. Thalo represents the highest artistic achievement of the auteur's creativity so far. Its symbolism is notably more comprehensive, consistent, and focused than in any of his previous works. Its finesse in both conception and execution has brought the film world of Pema Tsedan's Tibet into the most emblematic realm of film as moving images that explore life beyond its appearance. Comparing Pema Tsedan's films and fiction reveals a shared thematic structure reflecting the evolving Tibetan landscape and the characters' responses to societal changes. Both mediums depict individuals grappling with shifts from traditional rural life to urban consumerism. Whether embracing or resisting change, the characters navigate their evolving world. Tsedan's characters, like Amatsomo and the Old Lama, negotiate their positions amidst these transformations, presenting a common theme across his works. However, the functions of storytelling diverge between cinema and literature due to their respective modalities. Films offer concrete visual representations of Tibet, shaping reception in a realistic mode,
while literature allows for more open, allegorical interpretations. Seddon's films highlight Tibet's socio-political issues and identity, while his short stories emphasize universal human conditions. Each medium capitalizes on its strengths. Fluid identity exploration suits film, while rhythmic narrative structures thrive in literature. Tharlo stands out as Seddon's first film to seamlessly blend contemporary Tibetan relevance with universal allegorical themes, underscoring its significance. The film adaptation follows the short story's basic structure, but adds significant details. It includes new scenes like Tharlo observing a couple in a photo studio, showcasing his solitary life on the mountain, and moments with Yangtze in a karaoke bar. Symbolic elements such as an orphaned lamb and firecrackers are introduced. Two scenes are omitted: banter between the police chief and village chief, and Tharlo meeting strangers outside the photo studio. The first-time collaboration with Lu Songye will play a crucial role in establishing the cinematic visual style in Tharlo and advancing Pema Tseden's future films with a budget of 2 million yuan. In Tharlo, the camera angles are more pronounced than in the director's previous films, emphasizing a scopic effect that is central to the film's thematic exploration. This scopic effect enhances the audience's engagement with the visual storytelling, creating a more immersive experience. The film's bold cinematographic design is particularly praised for its use of long takes, static camera positions, and mirror reflections, all of which contribute to the mise-en-scène, a term that refers to the arrangement of everything that appears in the framing of a shot, including actors, lighting, decor, and props. The entire film consists of 51 scenes and 87 shots, 36 of which are single shot scenes. This means that nearly half of the scenes are presented without any cuts, allowing for a continuous and unbroken visual flow. Such a technique demands precise choreography and timing, adding to the film's artistic and technical complexity. These 87 shots are spread across 124 minutes of runtime, making the average shot in Tharlo approximately 1 minute and 40 seconds long. This is in stark contrast to the average shot length in contemporary Hollywood films, which is about 2.5 seconds. The significantly longer average shot duration in Tharlo underscores the deliberate pacing and the emphasis on visual storytelling. Every scene is crafted to carry substantial meaning, moving the narrative forward in a way that invites viewers to contemplate and engage deeply with the film's themes and characters. The film opens with a 3-minute sequence of Tharlo intoning "Serve the People" in Chinese in the style of a traditional Tibetan Buddhist chant.
但是的意见有不同。中国古时候有个文学家叫做司马迁的说过：“人固有一死，或重于泰山，或轻于鸿毛。为人民的利益而死，就比泰山还重。替法西斯卖力，替报效人民和压迫人民的人去死，就比鸿毛还轻。正是对同志就是为人民的利益而死的，他的死是比泰山还重的。”
This comes as a surprise to the viewer, since Buddhist chant is the last form of recitation one would associate with this iconic Chinese Communist propaganda passage. The incongruity between the form of recitation and the content recited symbolizes the differences between the two cultural value systems. In Tharlo, tradition and modernity are not explored in their general terms, but in their specific manifestation in contemporary Tibet within the context of Communist China. Furthermore, an extra layer of this scene is added by the opening close-up of the lamb being fed from a bottle as Tharlo is reciting the passage. Tharlo brings his lamb with him everywhere because, being an orphan like himself, the lamb has lost its mother to a wolf. This image of the lamb as a symbol of the needy alerts the audience to the fact that the film not only tells a personal story, but also a social one. The recitation of "Serve the People" in full, although in a tone incongruous with the content, functions as a reminder of the Chinese Communist Party's claim to serve the people, to liberate the oppressed, and to help those in need, just as Tharlo cares for the lamb. However, this claim has fallen short of reality later in the film. The film follows a linear narrative structure with slow progression, as Tharlo, commonly known as Ponytail because of his hairstyle, meets different characters on his journey. Begins with a solitary shepherd who was orphaned since childhood and lacks human connection except for a human scarecrow near his house. He takes great pride in herding sheep for the villagers, receiving money and sheep in return every year. Herding has become a significant occupation as people are drawn to towns and cities by economic development for opportunities. Tharlo enjoys herding sheep, and with his math skills and memory can count and protect them from wolves at night. He even buys firecrackers to scare away the wolves if needed. One day, he is called to the town police station to get an ID card made, as per a policy implemented by the Chinese Communist Party. While it's important for verifying identity, the true intention of the Communist Party is to control and identify those who are against them, as they introduce the social credit system, raising concerns about data privacy, surveillance, and authority. In the opening scene, Tharlo questions the policeman about the need for an ID since he knows himself, but the policeman explains that it will help him identify himself in the city. From being called to get his ID card, Tharlo ends up at a hair salon owned by a young girl named Yang Tso, after being told by the photo studio owner that he needs to look good for the lifetime ID card. Yang Tso is not an ordinary Tibetan woman. She has short hair and smokes, which is uncommon in Tibetan culture, attracting Tharlo. They have a long conversation during which she learns about his valuable sheep. She eventually seduces him with her charm and beauty, convincing him to sell his sheep. Cut off his ponytail and start a new life with her in Lhasa. However, it turns out to be a deception when Tharlo wakes up after spending the night together to find out that she has taken all his money and left him.
He immediately goes to the police station to report the crime, but the same policeman he met earlier tells him that he no longer resembles the person in the photo and needs another one.
야, 다치시기는 어디 라란 죽지? 다는 어디 문 죽니? 떠나 저 다른 정도 와서 뭐 빨리네. 네 tukundara 다 어쩌니가 머리가 너제 제를 손에디 녀석지기는 뭐야?
Out of desperation, he rides his motorcycle to the mountains, run out of gas, drinks a bottle of alcohol,